Gita Mahatmya. In the Hari Vamsha it is stated, in all the Vedas, Ramayana, Puranas and Mahabharata, Lord Hari's glories are sung throughout, in the beginning, middle and end. The Bhagavad-Gita is one of the sections of the Bhishma Parva of the Mahabharata. Thus it is scripture. Scripture's narrations about the Supreme Lord, or are words spoken by the Supreme Lord. Srimad Bhagavatam is a beautiful narration of the pastimes of the Supreme Lord, and Bhagavad-Gita is the song of the Supreme Lord Krishna. Both are non-different from him. Gita Mahatmya is a conversation between Shiva and his consort Shrimati Parvati. It is Lord Shiva's glorification of the Bhagavad-Gita. Anyone who hears or studies this Gita Mahatmya will quickly have all his accumulated sins destroyed. And one who remembers this discourse with great faith will surely attain the results of all pious acts and great sacrifices. After enjoying all worldly opulences, he will reach the abode of Lord Vishnu. In these sections, the glories of Bhagavad-Gita will be discussed in detail under the following topics. Gita Mahatmya, glorification of Chapter 1. Sharma, although born in a Brahmana family, was a sinful, wicked man, devoid of piety. He particularly enjoyed hurting others. For his livelihood, he sold leaves he had collected and sewn together to make plates and cups. One day, Sharma entered the garden of a sage to collect leaves, and a snake slithered in and killed him. Because of all his sins, he was cast into many hells and suffered a long time. Afterward, he received the body of a bull. As a bull, he was purchased by a crippled man, and for many years had to carry heavy loads. One day, the bull, his back piled with such an extremely heavy load, fell unconscious. Bystanders felt sorry for the bull and bestowed upon it some results of their pious acts. One person there, a prostitute, doubted she had ever performed pious acts, but upon learning that everyone was offering pious credits to the bull, she also offered whatever results of pious activities she might have had. After the bull died and entered the abode of Yamaraj, the god of death, Yamaraj informed him, "Now you are freed from the reactions of all your previous sinful deeds, because a prostitute gave you her pious credits." In his next life, Sharma again took birth as an elevated Brahmana, but this time he could remember his past lives. He decided to find the prostitute who had caused his liberation from hell. When he found her, he asked her what pious acts she had performed. The prostitute replied that her pet parrot had daily recited verses that had completely purified her heart. Thereafter the parrot told them about the recitation. In a previous life, the parrot had been a proud and envious yet learned Brahmana, who had insulted other learned persons. He had now, therefore, received the body of a parrot. As a parrot, he had often heard certain sages reciting the first chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, and he had also begun reciting it. So he had become purified. After being sold to the prostitute, the parrot continued his recitation and thus earned the prostitute pious credits. Sharma eventually became completely pure, and within a short time he attained Vaikuntha, the supreme destination. Gita Mahatmya, glorification of Chapter 2. Lord Vishnu continued his glorification of the Bhagavad-Gita. Please listen carefully, Lakshmi Devi, as I tell you the glories of the second chapter. Once a learned Brahmana named Deva Sharma satisfied the demigods, but he remained unhappy because he desired to know the absolute truth. Out of his strong desire for such knowledge, Deva Sharma spoke with many sages and rendered service to them. One day he met a meditating yogi who was peaceful and devoid of material desires. The yogi who had complete knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead advised Deva Sharma to meet Mitravan, a goatherd in Asaupura, and take instruction from him in the science of God realization. Hearing this, Devashama offered respectful obeisances to the yogi and left to find Mitravan. When Devashama arrived in Asaupura, he found Mitravan in a beautiful forest beside a small river, sealed atop some rocks. Mitravan looked peaceful, and his goats moved here and there fearlessly. Some goats even sat next to tigers and other ferocious animals. Devashama also became peaceful, and he approached Mitravan to inquire about devotion to Lord Krishna. Mitravan narrated the following story. My dear Devashama, once when I was in this forest herding goats by the bank of this river, a tiger attacked. After the goats ran away, and so did I. From a distance I saw one goat being chased by the tiger, but suddenly a strange, wonderful thing happened. The tiger lost its anger and no longer desired to eat the goat. Mitravan described that both the tiger and goat were confused by this sudden peacefulness, and so they approached him to ask what had happened. Mitravan in turn inquired from a monkey, who told him the story of Sukama, a learned sage. Sukama had once pleased another sage by feeding him sumptuously and speaking pleasant words. The pleased sage gave Sukama the second chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita written on stone. The sage left after giving Sukama an instruction to recite this chapter daily. Because Sukama followed this instruction, he quickly attained complete knowledge of Lord Krishna, and because of his devoted austerities performed at the very place where Mitravan and the monkey were standing, anyone who came there no longer felt the pangs of hunger and thirst, and at once attained complete peace. Thereafter Mitravan told Devashama that he and the tiger and goat had later found the stone in a temple and had begun reciting the second chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita daily. In this way they had quickly attained devotion to Lord Krishna. Devashama decided to carefully follow Mitravan's example, and thereafter, in the village where Devashama lived, visitors would recite with him the second chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. In this way, Devashama attained the mercy and the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Gita Mahatmya, Glorification of Chapter 3. Lord Vishnu then recited the glories of the third chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita by narrating the story of Yada. Yada was a brahmana who had wasted his wealth in gambling, drinking, hunting, and visiting prostitutes. Once, after going on a business trip, he earned a lot of money and then decided to return home. In this way, Yada stopped for a night in a deserted place. Robbers there plundered his wealth and murdered him. And because of his sinful life, Yada attained the body of a ghost. Yada's son, in spite of his father, was religious and learned in the Vedic scriptures. When the father remained absent for a long time, the son decided to search for him. Wherever the son went, he inquired about his father. One day the son met a man who told him what had happened. Yada's son started at once for Gaya to worship Lord Vishnu, to release his father from ghostly life. One evening, on the way to Gaya, the son happened to perform his daily worship of Lord Krishna under the same tree where his father had been killed. As the son recited the third chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, loud sound came from the sky. He looked up and saw his father changed into a most beautiful being, his body the color of a dark rain cloud. He was four-armed, he was dressed in yellow cloth, and his bodily effulgence lit up all directions. The father said, "My dear son, because you recited the third chapter of Bhagavad-Gita, you freed me from a ghostly form. Now you should return home. The purpose of your going to Gaya has already been achieved." Then the father asked the son to liberate a brother and some ancestors who had also led sinful lives and were suffering in hell. The sun said he would recite the third chapter of Bhagavad-Gita until the time all the souls trapped in hell were freed. Then an airplane arrived from Vaikuntha, the spiritual world, and transported the father to the supreme destination. The son returned home and began reciting daily the third chapter in front of a deity of Lord Krishna. As the recitation continued, Lord Vishnu sent his messengers, the Vishnu Dutas, to the kingdom of Yamaraj, who punishes the sinful. The Vishnu Dutas told Yamaraj that Lord Vishnu wished him well and had ordered him to free the conditioned souls suffering in hell. Yamaraj at once had all the souls released. Then Yamaraj went to Svetadweep to see Lord Vishnu. Yamaraj found the Lord lying on his serpent bed, Anantashesha, while Lakshmi Devi massaged his feet. His spiritual body had the effulgence of many suns, and demigods and sages surrounded him and sang his praises. With folded hands, Yamaraj offered obeisances and prayers to Lord Vishnu. My dear Lord Vishnu, you are the well-wisher of all the conditioned souls, and there is no limit to your glories. From you the Vedas have come. You are time and the cause of time. You are the cause and the maintainer of the three worlds, and you will destroy all things. You are the super soul, directing everyone's activities. You are the guru of the universe and the goal of devotees. O lotus-eyed one, please accept my obeisances again and again. After praying, Yamaraj asked the Lord for instructions. In a voice as deep as thunder and sweet as nectar, Lord Vishnu replied, My dear Yamaraj, I need not instruct you on your duty. Kindly return to your abode, and in the future continue your duty with my full blessings. Thereafter, Yada's son was taken to the abode of Lord Vishnu, where he eternally engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Gita Mahatmya, Glorification of Chapter 4. Lord Vishnu then described the glories of the fourth chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. He told of a saint named Bharata, who lived on the bank of the Ganges. There the devoted Bharata daily recited the fourth chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. Once Bharata went on a pilgrimage to the town of Tapodana and saw a deity of Lord Krishna. On his way home he rested beneath two fruit trees, using the root of one as a pillow and the root of the other as a footrest. There, as usual, he recited the fourth chapter. When Bharat left that place, both trees dried up and died. The two souls living in those trees took their next birth as daughters of a pious Brahmana. When the girls reached 7 years of age, they went on a pilgrimage and happened to meet the great sage Bharata. Upon seeing him, they fell at his feet and said in sweet words, O Maharaj Bharata, by your mercy we were freed from the forms of trees. Bharata heard this with surprise. Then the girls narrated their story to Bharata. Dear Maharaj Bharata, in a previous life we were Apsaras, heavenly nymphs. Once we were ordered by King Indra to cause the fall down of the sage Satyatapa, who was performing difficult austerities on the bank of the river Godavari. Satyatapa had complete control over his senses and had become so advanced in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead that Brahma, the creator of the universe, daily visited him to inquire from him about devotional service. But Indra was displeased to see Satyatapa's purity and elevation. Indra worried that this powerful sage would one day want to usurp the position of King of Heaven. To prevent this, Indra sent us to the bank of the Godavari. There we danced provocatively to sexually agitate the sage and seduce him, and Satyatapa cursed us, saying, You both go and become fruit trees on the bank of the river Ganga. Upon hearing his curse, we fell at his feet and begged forgiveness, for we had acted merely as Indra's servants. When Satyatapa saw our repentant attitude, he became pleased and told us we would live as trees only until Maharaj Bharata came in contact with us. He also blessed us that we would be able to remember our previous lives. Reminding Bharata that he had rested between two fruit trees, the two girls said they had heard his recitation of the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. After being freed from that form of life, they said they had been born in a family of devotees. Since then they had lost all the desire to enjoy this world. They had carefully been reciting the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita daily, and thus had attained devotion to the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. Gita Mahatmya, glorification of chapter 5. Lord Vishnu asked Lakshmi Devi to listen carefully as he described the glories of the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. Once in a town named Puru Kutsapura, there lived a Brahmana called Pingala. Although well educated, he lacked interest in studying, and so when he reached youth he gave up his educational pursuits. Instead he learned to play musical instruments and sing and dance. He became so skilled and famous that the king invited him to live in the palace. But his intimacy with the king made him proud, and he became fond of criticizing others. Worse, he took up intoxication and adultery. Despite his promiscuity, Pingala had a wife named Aruna, who had been born in a low-class family. She too was lusty and promiscuous, and when Pingala discovered this, Aruna murdered him. Thereafter she enjoyed life with many men, but she soon contracted a venereal disease. Her youthful body therefore became ugly, and before long she died. Both husband and wife fell into the deepest regions of hell and suffered tremendously. In their next lives they both took birth as birds, Pingala a vulture and Aruna a parrot. One day, while the parrot searched for food, the vulture attacked her. The vulture could somehow remember his past life, and he understood that the parrot had been his wife. After a flurry of fighting, both birds fell down and drowned in a human skull filled with water. They were brought before Yamaraj, and because they vividly remembered their sins, they were frightened. But Yamaraj said, "You are now freed from all sinful reactions and may go to Vaikuntha." Dumbfounded, Pingala and Aruna asked Yamaraj how persons of their caliber had the right to enter Vaikuntha. Then Yamaraj told them about a pure devotee of Lord Vishnu who had daily recited the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. When this devotee, who was completely free of lust, left his body, he went straight to Vaikuntha. Because of his recitation of Bhagavad-Gita, his body had also become pure. Therefore, when Pingala and Aruna as birds had touched his skull, both of them had achieved freedom from sinful reactions and attained the right to enter Vaikuntha. After Pingala and Aruna heard the glories of the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, they became overjoyed, and a flower airplane arrived to take them to the spiritual world. Gita Mahatmya, glorification of chapter 6. Lord Vishnu then recited the glories of the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. In a beautiful town named Pratishthanapura on the bank of the Godavari river, there ruled a popular king named Jnana Shruti. He had many good qualities, and he daily performed an opulent fire sacrifice and many other pious acts. He gave charity, dug wells and lakes, and so on. Once some demigods went to the king's residence in the form of swans. As they flew above his palace, the demigod heard several swans mention Janashuti's greatness. But Bhadrashva laughed and asked, "Is Janashruti Maharaj as powerful as the great sage Raikva?" The king happened to hear the swans' conversation from the roof of his high palace, and then went down in a happy mood and ordered his charioteer to go out and find Raikva. Thus ordered, the charioteer departed for holy places. Upon arriving in Kashmir, he saw the sage sitting on a small cart near the door of a temple. The charioteer fell at Raikva's feet and asked him where he lived, what his full name was, and why he was sitting there. Raikva thought for some time and replied, "I am fully satisfied. I do not require anything." The charioteer understood and returned at once to Pratishthanapura. When he arrived, he offered his respects to the king and informed him of all that had taken place. The king then decided to visit the great sage Raikva. Seated on a beautiful chariot filled with valuable gifts, he left for Kashmir. When the king finally met Raikva and had fallen at his feet, he placed many silks and jewels before the sage. The sage, however, became angry and said, "You foolish king, take these useless things away. Put them on your chariot and leave this place at once." With great devotion the king fell at Raikva's feet again and begged to be forgiven. He asked, "O sage, how have you attained such a level of renunciation and devotion to the Lord?" Pleased by the king's submissive attitude, Raikva replied that he had daily recited the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. Thereafter King Janashruti also began to recite it daily. After some time a flower airplane appeared and took the king to Vaikuntha. Raikva in the meantime had also gone to Vaikuntha, where he engaged in the service of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Gita Mahatmya, glorification of chapter 7. After narrating how Lord Vishnu had spoken to Lakshmi Devi the glories of the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad-Gita, Lord Shiva said to Parvati, "Now I will tell you the glories of the 7th chapter." Lord Shiva narrated the story of Shankukarna, a Brahmana occupied as a businessman. Shankukarna amassed so much wealth that kings visited his house to dine. But the miserly Shankukarna kept some of his wealth buried, concealed from his relatives, and he never performed devotional acts or the rituals for his forefathers. Once, after his 4th marriage, Shankukarna took rest for the night. While asleep, he received a snake bite and died. It attained the body of a snake ghost, and he came to reside at the place where he had buried his wealth. Eventually, he became tired of being trapped in a ghostly body, so he appeared to his sons in a dream and asked their help. When his lazy sons woke up, they talked about their dream. Then one of them took a spade and went to the place his father had indicated. The son did not know exactly where to find the buried wealth, but he searched greedily until he found a snake hole. As he started to dig, suddenly a huge and appalling snake crawled out and asked, "Who are you? Who sent you to dig here?" Trembling for his life, the son replied, "It is me, your son, Shiva, to whom you appeared in a dream." The snake laughed and asked why the boy, if indeed his son had not performed the necessary rituals to free him from hellish life. The son inquired how to do this. His father replied, "Not by any kind of charity or austerity, but only by recitation of the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita will I become free from birth and death." The father instructed his son to invite a Brahmana to recite the 7th chapter during a ceremony to offer oblations to the forefathers. After this ceremony took place, the Brahmana chanted the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, and Shankukarna gave up his frightful body and attained a divine four-armed form. Before he left for Vaikuntha, he blessed his sons and told them the location of his wells. After digging it up, the sons, whose mind had become fixed in devotion to Lord Krishna, used the wells to build temples, dig wells and holy ponds, and distribute sanctified food. Moreover, the sons daily recited the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita and quickly attained the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Anyone who recites or hears this chapter will be freed from all sinful reactions. Gita Mahatmya, glorification of chapter 8. Thereafter Lord Shiva asked Parvati to listen to the glories of the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. A Brahmana of the name Bhava Sharma once lived in the important town Amardakapura. He had taken a prostitute as his wife, and he enjoyed meat-eating, intoxication, stealing, adultery, and hunting. Once, after a bout of drinking wine, Bhava Sharma contracted a serious disease, and after many days of suffering, he died and attained the body of a date palm tree. One day, 2 ghosts, Brahma Rakshasa, took shelter beneath this palm tree after unceasingly wandering over the earth. Hungry and thirsty by their activities in a previous life, they had attained these ghostly bodies. One of them had once been the Brahmana Kusibala, who had been conversant with many branches of knowledge and had been learned in the Vedas. The other ghost had been his wife, Kumati. Kushibala and his evil-minded wife, both greedy, had been in the habit of collecting much charity daily without ever giving charity to other brahmanas. When they died, they both became ghosts. So while these 2 ghosts were resting under the palm tree, the one who had been the wife asked her former husband how to atone. He replied that by having knowledge of Brahman, the self and fruitive activities, this could be accomplished. Upon hearing this, his wife inquired, "What is Brahman? What is the self? What are fruitive activities?" Because she spoke in Sanskrit, she coincidentally chanted the first 2 lines of the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. Upon hearing these lines, Bhava Sharma became freed from his tree body and again attained the body of a sinless Brahmana, and suddenly a spiritual airplane appeared to take the ghostly husband and wife back to Vaikuntha. Thereafter, Bhava Sharma wrote down the 2 lines from the Bhagavad-Gita, and he went to Kashi Puri with the intention of worshipping Lord Krishna by performing great austerities and continuously chanting these 2 lines: Kim tad Brahma, Kim Adhyatmam, Kim Karma Purushottama. After some time in Vaikuntha, Lord Vishnu once unexpectedly arose from his rest. Lakshmi Devi inquired with folded hands what had awakened him. Lord Vishnu said, "My dear Lakshmi, in Kashi Puri, on the bank of the river Ganges, my devotee is performing great austerities by continuously chanting half a verse of the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. For a long time I have been thinking how to reward his devotion." Lord Shiva then told Parvati that Bhava Sharma pleased Lord Vishnu so much that the Lord awarded him a place in Vaikuntha to engage eternally in the service of his lotus feet. Moreover, all his ancestors also attained the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. Gita Mahatmya, glorification of chapter 9. Then Lord Shiva related to Parvati the glories of the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. Once in a town called Mahishmati, there lived a Brahmana named Madhava. He strictly followed all the Vedic injunctions, and he was so learned that he always received much charity, with which he performed great sacrifices. Once, however, when he was about to offer a goat in sacrifice, the goat laughed and said, "O Brahmana, what benefit is there in performing these sacrifices, which simply keep one in the cycle of repeated birth and death? Just see my position after performing so many fire sacrifices. Madhava asked the goat what activities it had performed in previous lives to become a goat. Everyone at the sacrifice gathered around to hear the goat's words. The goat told them that he had been a ritualistic brahmana. Because his wife had wanted her child cured of some disease, she had once asked him to offer a goat to Durga, the wife of Lord Shiva. As the brahmana offered the goat, it cursed him, "You sinner, lowest of all, you wish to make my children fatherless? You will also have to take birth as a goat." So at the time of his death, the brahmana had attained grace of Govinda and remembered his previous birth. The goat continued, "Once in Kurukshetra there lived a king named Chandra Sarma, who belonged to the Sun dynasty. At the time of a solar eclipse, the king decided to give a Shudra, a worker, to a Brahmana. After he offered this worker to the Brahmana with much devotion, 2 of dog-eaters appeared from the worker's body. Both of them closely approached the Brahmana and suddenly entered his body. The Brahmana, however, remained undisturbed, and while remembering Lord Govinda, he began chanting the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. The whole event stunned the king. His amazement increased, however, when the Vishnu Dutas, the devotees of Lord Vishnu, appeared. The Vishnu Dutas ousted the Chandalas from the body and drove them away. Then the king asked the Brahmana, "O learned one, who were those 2 persons, and which mantras did you chant? Which deity did you remember?" The Brahmana explained that sin personified, accompanied by offense personified, had appeared as 2 Chandalas, and he had been chanting the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, which can release one from all fearful situations. He informed the king that by chanting this chapter, anyone can remember the lotus feet of Govinda. Thereafter the king learned from the Brahmana to chant the 9th chapter, and he gradually attained the lotus feet of Govinda. When Madhava heard this narration from the goat, he at once set the goat free. Thereafter Madhava recited the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita daily. Gita Mahatmya, glorification of chapter 10. Thereafter Lord Shiva said then that in Kashipuri there was a peaceful Brahmana named Dhira Buddhi, whose senses and mind were fixed in glorification of Lord Krishna. Wherever Dhira Buddhi went, Lord Shiva served and protected him with great love. Seeing those activities of Lord Shiva, his eternal servant, Bringirti asked him what this great devotee had done to merit Lord Shiva's personal service. Lord Shiva then narrated a story. Once, as he sat in the moonlight, a sudden great wind made the trees shake wildly. A shadow was cast all around, and a large bird of the color of a rain cloud appeared. The bird said to Lord Shiva, "O Mahadeva, all glories to you, the shelter of all. Your glories are limitless, because you protect the devotees, and you are the foremost devotee of the Supreme Lord Krishna. Great souls like Brihaspati, the preceptor of the demigods, sing your praises. But even the 1,000-headed Ananta Shesha cannot fully describe your glories. So what to speak of a swan like me with such small intelligence?" After hearing this prayer, Lord Shiva asked the swan why he had a black crow-like color. The swan, who resembled the swan carrier of Lord Brahma, told Lord Shiva a story. Once the swan had enjoyed in a beautiful lake, but on one occasion, when he had wanted to fly off, he fell to the ground and his body turned black. He wondered why, and then he heard a voice from lotuses in the lake. "O swan," the voice said, "get up. I shall tell you why you fell and turned black." The swan got up and went to the center of the lake, where he saw 5 extraordinarily beautiful lotuses. From the lotus appeared a beautiful lady. After circumambulating the lady, the swan was told that he had flown over her and thus committed an offense and became black. Because she had felt sorry for him, she had called him back. This lady obviously had extraordinary powers. She told the swan how she had attained them. She said, "In a previous life I was Sarojavadana, a chaste young woman, and when I married I served my husband faithfully. But one day I found a black Maina bird, and because I took care of it, my service to my husband slackened. So my husband said I would become a Maina in my next life, which indeed happened. But because I had been chaste, I came in contact with some sages, and one of their daughters took care of me. During my stay with them, I heard recitations of the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita every morning and evening. As a result, I attained the body of an apsara, a divine nymph, who is fond of water and can change her form at will. In my apsara life, I was called Padmavati. One day I saw the beautiful lotus flowers in this lake, and when I came here, I started to enjoy in the water. At that time, however, Durvasa Muni arrived and saw me naked. Out of fear of him, I took the form of 5 lotuses. Durvasa Muni's eyes started to emanate fire, and he cursed me to stay in that form of lotuses for 100 years. Fortunately enough, though, I was able to remember the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. Today I was freed from his curse. If you hear from me this 10th chapter, you will also be able to free yourself from your awkward position. After completing her recitation of this 10th chapter, Padmavati left in an airplane for Vaikuntha. Thereafter the swan went to Lord Shiva and offered him a beautiful lotus from the lake and told Lord Shiva his story. When he completed his tale, he gave up his body and took birth as Dhira Buddhi. From childhood, Dhira Buddhi always chanted the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, and whoever in whatever condition of life would hear his recitation would attain the darshan or audience of Lord Vishnu. For this reason, Lord Shiva always served Dhira Buddhi. Gita Mahatmya, glorification of chapter 11. Thereafter Lord Shiva narrated to Parvati the glories of the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. In Megankara, the town of the famous temple of Jagadishvara, the controller of the universe, there lived a pure Brahmana named Sunanda. He remained a brahmachari, a celibate, all his life. Sunanda often sat in front of Lord Jagadishvara and recited the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita and remembered the Lord's universal form. By reciting chapter 11, Sunanda gained complete control over his senses and was always able to remember Jagadishvara. Once Sunanda and his associates went on a pilgrimage. One day they reached a town called Vivaha Mandapa, where they took rest in a guest house for pilgrims. But when Sunanda woke up, he found all his associates gone, and so he at once went out to look for them. After some time, Sunanda met the mayor of the town, who couldn't say where Sunanda's associates were, but who fell at Sunanda's feet because he could see that as a devotee, Sunanda had no equal. When the major invited him to stay in the town, Sunanda agreed. After 8 days, a villager approached Sunanda, crying loudly because his son had been eaten by Rakshasa, an evil being. Sunanda inquired, "Where does that Rakshasa stay, and how did he eat your son?" The villager replied that this demon was eating villagers every day. Because of that, the villagers had requested the demon to protect them in exchange for daily food. To arrange for the demon's meals of human beings, the villagers had built a guest house, and all travelers were sent there. While the travelers slept, the Rakshasa would eat them, and in this way the villagers were safe. The villager then explained how his son had been eaten. The night before, a friend of his son had come, and the villager, not knowing who the friend was, had sent him to the guest house. The son soon found out and tried to rescue the friend, but by the time the son got to the guest house, it was too late. His friend had already been eaten, and unfortunately for the son, he too was eaten, along with some travelers. Afterwards, the villager had gone to the Rakshasa and asked why the Rakshasa had eaten the villager's son along with the travelers. The villager also asked if there was any possibility of getting the son back. The Rakshasa replied that he had been unaware of the presence of the son and so had ate him along with everyone else. There was, however, a way to get him back, but only when the Rakshasa was freed from his demoniac body by the mercy of a person who had daily recited the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. The Rakshasa said that there was a Brahmana whom he had not eaten, because somehow he knew that the Brahmana regularly recited the 11th chapter. If this Brahmana would recite the chapter and then sprinkle water on him, the Rakshasa would be freed from the curse. Thereafter Sunanda inquired what sin this person had performed to attain a Rakshasa body, and the villager replied by telling the Rakshasa's story. Once a farmer saw a vulture attack someone in the fields, but the farmer did nothing about it, even though he stood just a short distance away. When a yogi passing by saw what was happening, he tried to help, but was too late. The yogi then became angry with the farmer and told him that one who helps others in need pleases Lord Vishnu, whereas one who can help others but does not do so is liable to be punished by Yamaraj, made to suffer in hell, and then be born as a wolf. The yogi then cursed the farmer to be born as a Rakshasa. But the farmer said, "I was watching the fields the whole night and I was quite tired, so kindly be merciful to me." The yogi replied, "When someone who daily recites the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita sprinkles water on your head, then you will be free of this curse." After telling this story, the villager asked Sunanda to kindly sprinkle water on the head of the Rakshasa. Sunanda agreed. When they went to the Rakshasa, Sunanda recited the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, and as he sprinkled water on the Rakshasa's head, the creature at once attained a four-armed form like that of Lord Vishnu. More astonishing, not only the Rakshasa, but also the thousands of people he had eaten attained the same type of spiritual form, and were all ready to depart for Vaikuntha. Before they could go, however, the villager stopped them and wanted to know which one was his son, because the villager wanted him to return home. Then one of those beautiful persons said, "My dear sir, many times you have been my son and I've been yours. But now, by the grace of this great devotee Sunandana, I've been released from birth and death. Now I'm going to my real home, Vaikuntha. Dear sir, kindly surrender to Sunanda and hear from him the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, because then you also will be able to attain the abode of Lord Vishnu." Of this there is no doubt. Lord Krishna spoke these nectarine instructions on the battlefield of Kurukshetra as a reply to Arjuna's questions. Only by hearing and reciting this discourse can one cut the tight knot binding us to the cycle of birth and death. Thereupon the son and all those other fortunate souls left for Vaikuntha. Later the villager learned the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita from Sunanda, and shortly thereafter both he and Sunanda went to Vaikuntha. Gita Mahatmya, glorification of chapter 12. After that, Lord Shiva then recited the wonderful glories of the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. Once a young prince arrived in the holy place Kolhapura. He first took a bath and worshipped his ancestors. Then he went to the temple of Mahalakshmi Devi, the Lord's divine consort. Because she fulfills all desires, the prince offered his obeisances to her and prayed, O Devi, whose heart is full of mercy, you are worshipped as the giver of all fortune and the mother of creation. You are the wonderful energy of Lord Achyuta, who maintains the whole world. You protect the devotees, fulfill their desires, and engage them in the service of Lord Achyuta. Kindly be merciful to me. When Mahalakshmi heard his prayers, she felt pleased and told him he could ask for any benediction. The prince told Mahalakshmi that his father, King Brihat Ratha, had been performing a horse sacrifice, but had become ill and died, leaving the sacrifice incomplete. The prince now aspired to complete the sacrifice to fulfill his father's desire. One of the horses, however, had been stolen, and he had not been able to find it. Therefore he had decided to ask her for this particular horse, which had already been purified for this purpose. Mahalakshmi Devi told the prince about a Brahmana named Siddha Samadhi, who lived by the gate of her temple. He would be able to grant the prince his desire. The prince went and found Siddha Samadhi, who said to him, You have been sent here by Mother Mahalakshmi Devi, so I shall fulfill your desire. Thereafter, by chanting mantras, Siddha Samadhi summoned all the demigods and asked them to bring back the prince's horse, which had been stolen by Lord Indra. At once the demigods brought the horse, and Siddha Samadhi dismissed them. When the prince saw all these wonders, he fell at the feet of Siddha Samadhi. Could Siddha Samadhi, the prince asked, kindly bring the prince's father back to life? Siddha Samadhi chuckled, and together they went to the place where the prince had kept his father's body. There Siddha Samadhi took some water in his hand and chanted some mantras as he sprinkled on the head of King Brihat Ratha's dead body. As soon as the water touched the king's head, the king sat up and asked Siddha Samadhi to identify himself. When the king learned all that had taken place, he repeatedly offered obeisances to Siddha Samadhi and then inquired what austerities he had performed to attain such powers. Siddha Samadhi replied, Dear King Brihat Ratha, daily I recite the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. Hearing these words of that great devotee, the king learned the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita from Siddha Samadhi, and in the course of time both the king and his son attained devotion to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Gita Mahatmya, glorification of chapter 13. After reciting the glories of 12th chapter, Lord Shiva then invited Parvati to enjoy hearing the glories of the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. Once in Hariharapura, a town where the deity of Lord Shiva, Harihara, is worshipped, there lived a Brahmana named Hari Dikshita. He was learned and led a simple, austere life. His wife, however, was called by people Durachara, bad behavior, because of her low-class activities. She was addicted to intoxicants. She always spoke to her husband in abusive language and had never slept with him. Moreover, she kept the company of other men to satisfy her desires, and she had constructed a small hut in the forest to meet with lovers. One night she went to this hut because she wanted a lover to satisfy her, but no one was present, so she wandered in the forest hoping to find someone. Then, agitated and frustrated, she sat down and cried. Hearing her sobbing, a hungry tiger ran in her direction. She heard someone coming and thought it was someone who would satisfy her lust. Suddenly the tiger appeared, about to rip her apart. The woman said, Why have you come here to kill me? First tell me this, and then you may kill me. The tiger laughed and told a story. Previously, I was born in a Brahmana's family. Still, I was greedy and had no control over my senses. I used to sit on the river banks and performed sacrifices for persons unqualified to take part in them. I also accepted food from materialistic persons, and for my sense gratification I collected more funds than necessary, and under false pretenses I would criticize brahmanas who strictly followed regulative principles, and I would never give charity to anyone. Even when I became old and weak, I collected and hoarded funds. One day some cruel brahmanas set some dogs upon me, one of which bit my leg. I fell over and quickly died. After that I attained this body of a tiger, but I was able to remember my former birth. Therefore in this birth I do not attack any devotees, renunciants, or chaste ladies. I eat only sinful persons and unchaste women. Since you are the most unchaste and sinful woman, you will definitely become my meal. After being devoured by the tiger, the woman was taken by the Yamadutas to the hell known as Puyoda, a lake full of stool, urine, and blood. She had to stay there for 10 million kalpas. One kalpa is 4,320,000,000 years. Later, she was thrown into the hell known as Raurava, where she remained for 100 manvantaras. One manvantara equals 306,720,000 years. Finally, she took birth again on earth, this time as a female Chandala, dog-eater. Then she continued her sinful way of life, and consequently she contracted serious diseases. By good fortune, however, she went to the holy place Hariharapura, where she had once lived, and there she heard the great saint Vasudeva recite the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. She became attracted and wanted to hear it again and again, and by that hearing she became completely free from the reactions of her past sinful activities, attained a four-armed form, and was taken to Vaikuntha. Gita Mahatmya, glorification of chapter 14. After narrating the glories of 13th chapter, Lord Shiva then asked Parvati to listen attentively to his narration of the glories of the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. Once a king named Vikrama Vetala went to the forest to hunt with his son and 2 dogs. Upon reaching the forest, they released a dog to chase a rabbit, which of course ran quickly away. After some time, the dog and rabbit reached a beautiful hermitage. There the deer were sitting happily under the shade of trees. Monkeys were eating the fruits of those trees. Cubs of tigers were playing with baby elephants, and the snakes were crawling over the peacocks. At the hermitage dwelt a sage named Vatsa, who worshipped Lord Krishna by reciting the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. On this particular day, a disciple of the sage was washing his own feet, while he himself chanted the 14th chapter, and the water was moistening the earth. Suddenly the rabbit and dog appeared. Running fast, they both slipped in the mud, gave up their animal bodies, and attained heavenly bodies. An airplane then descended to take them to the heavenly worlds. Seeing these amusing events, King Vikrama Vetala and the disciple laughed, and the king inquired from the disciple how the rabbit and the dog had gone to heaven before their very eyes. The disciple replied, "In this hermitage lived the great sage Vatsa, who has completely conquered his senses and is always chanting the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. I am his disciple, and I was also reciting the 14th chapter. Because the rabbit and dog slipped on the water that had washed my feet, they both attained the higher planets. Now I will tell you why I laughed. Once a Brahmana named Keshava and his wife Vilobana lived in the town of Pratyudaka. She was a loose woman, and he was a cruel man. He murdered her because she kept company with other men. Therefore she became that dog in her next life, and he became that rabbit. Thereafter Lord Shiva said, King Vikrama Vetala also began reciting the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita daily. When he finally gave up his body, he went to Vaikuntha, where he eternally serves the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. Gita Mahatmya, glorification of chapter 15. The glories of the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita were narrated by Lord Shiva to Parvati as follows. In Gauda Desha there lived a king named Kripana Narasimha, who could defeat the demigods. This king had a greedy commander named Saraba Berunda, who together with the prince was conspiring to assassinate the king. But before Saraba Berunda could execute the plan, he died of cholera. In his next life, Saraba Berunda took birth as an excellent horse. One day a merchant bought this horse and went to the capital of Godadesh to sell it to the king. Upon reaching the palace, the merchant came before the king and explained that he had an incomparable horse to sell. The king took an interest and asked to see the horse at once. He examined it and without hesitation paid the sum the merchant asked. After some days the king decided to go to the forest to hunt. As he rode on his horse, he saw a deer and began chasing it. The chase went on, but finally the king became tired and thirsty, so he stopped to rest. He tied the horse to a tree and sat on a large rock. A little later a piece of parchment landed next to the king. On it was written half a verse of the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, and as the king read it aloud, the horse fell on the ground and at once gave up its body. Instantaneously it attained a transcendental four-armed form. This liberated soul then sat down in a Vaikuntha airplane and returned to the spiritual world. After calming down, the king noticed that close by there was a beautiful hermitage, and entering the hermitage, the king found that a Brahmana lived there named Vishnu Sharma, who had complete control over his senses. The king offered respects to that Brahmana and inquired how it was possible that his horse had attained Vaikuntha. The Brahmana replied, O king, previously you had a commander in your army named Saraba Berunda. Together with the prince, he had planned to usurp the throne. But before he could do so, he died of cholera. He took birth as that outstanding horse, and when he heard some words from the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, he attained Vaikuntha. The king thereupon again offered respect to that Brahmana and returned to his capital. Back in his capital, the king repeatedly read what was written on that piece of parchment. After a short time, he installed his son as the king of Gaudadesh and retired to the forest. There he regularly recited the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita and quickly attained the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. Gita Mahatmya, glorification of chapter 16. The glories of the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita were narrated by Lord Shiva to Parvati as follows. Once a king named Khatga Bahu kept a passionate male elephant. One day this elephant broke loose and in a fit of anger started to destroy the elephant shed. Then the elephant ran here and there, wildly chasing the citizens, who fled as fast as possible. When the king got the news, he at once went out to where the elephant was running amok. Because the king knew the art of controlling elephants, many people were running away from the elephant, but the king saw that one Brahmana was returning peacefully from taking his bath in a lake. This Brahmana was softly reciting the first 3 verses of the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, which start with the word Abhayam, fearlessness. When the people saw the Brahmana walking toward the elephant, they warned him, When the people saw the Brahmana walking toward the elephant, they warned him, but he paid them no heed and walked straight toward it. When the elephant saw the Brahmana approach, it at once lost its anger and lay down peacefully, and the Brahmana started rubbing it gently. After stroking the elephant for a few moments, the Brahmana went peacefully on his way. When the king and the citizens saw this amazing incident, they stood there dumbfounded. The king then went after the Brahmana, fell at his feet, and inquired what austerities and worship the Brahmana had performed to attain his amazing power. The Brahmana replied, "I daily recite some stanzas from the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita." The king then offered him 100 gold coins in charity and requested him to visit the palace and give some instructions in chanting those verses from the 16th chapter. After that, the king, thus instructed, had been chanting those verses for some time. He ordered the release of the passionate elephant. Fearing that the elephant would run wild again, the citizens were upset with the king. But when the king approached the elephant, it lay down at once, and the king stroked it. Afterward, the king returned to his palace, installed his son on the throne, and left for the forest, where he worshipped Lord Krishna by chanting verses from the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. Quickly he attained the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. One may be quite sinful, but if one chants this chapter from the Bhagavad-Gita, he quickly attains the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Gita Mahatmya, glorification of chapter 17. The nectarine glories of the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita was narrated by Lord Shiva to Parvati as follows. King Khatga Bahu's son had a crafty but foolish servant named Dushasana. Once this servant made a bet with the prince that the servant could ride the passionate male elephant. Thereupon the servant jumped on top of it and went a few steps, but people urged him not to ride that dangerous elephant. Dushasana, however, started to prod the elephant to make it move faster. Suddenly the elephant became angry and ran wildly here and there. Dushasana fell to the ground, was trampled by the elephant and died. Thereafter, Dushasana attained the body of an elephant in Simhala Dvipa, where he lived near the place of the king of Simhala Dvipa, a close friend of King Khatga Bahu. One day the king of Simhala Dvipa decided to send this elephant to his friend as a present. Upon receiving the elephant, King Khatga Bahu presented it to a poet who had pleased him with beautiful verses. And this poet in turn sold the elephant to the king of Malava for 100 gold coins. After some time, the elephant contracted a terminal disease. When the elephant keepers saw that the elephant had stopped eating and drinking, they reported the matter to the king, who then went to the elephant shed with the best animal doctors. At that time, much to the surprise of the king and everyone else, the elephant started to speak. The elephant said, "My dear king, you are pious and strict follower of the Vedas, and you always worship the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. So you should know that at this time these doctors will be of no avail. No hint of charity or sacrifice will help me at this time of death. If you care for me and want to help me, then kindly bring someone who daily recites the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita." Thus requested by the elephant, the king brought a great devotee who regularly recited the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. As this devotee chanted, he sprinkled water on the elephant, who then gave up its elephant body and attained a four-armed form similarly to that of Lord Vishnu. The former elephant, who had previously been Dushasana, sat down in an airplane that had been sent for him from Vaikuntha. The king then inquired from him about his previous birth. Dushasana told him everything and then left for Vaikuntha. After these events, that best of men, the king of Malava, also regularly recited the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, and after a short time he attained the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Gita Mahatmya, glorification of chapter 18. After telling Parvati the glories of the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, Lord Shiva said, "O daughter of the Himalayas, please listen to the glories of the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, which is higher than the Vedas and which bestows unlimited bliss. When it enters one's ears, it destroys all material desires. For the pure devotee, it is divine nectar. It is Lord Vishnu's very life, and it is a solace to the hearts of Lord Indra and the demigods, as well as to the great yogis headed by Sanaka and Sanandana. One who recites it sends the messengers of Yamaraj far away. There is no other recitation able so quickly to destroy all sins or free one from the threefold miseries of this world. Now listen with great devotion. Then he told the following story. On the topmost peak of the Mount Meru, the fabulous golden mountain standing in the center of the universe, is Amaravati, where Lord Indra is served by the demigods. One day Indra saw a beautiful young person arrive, being served by the servants of Lord Vishnu. When Lord Indra saw this, he at once fell to the ground, and the crown he had been wearing was placed on the young person's head. Thereupon all the demigods and denizens of the heavenly planets started to worship and serve the new king Indra, even though he had not performed the 100 horse sacrifices the holder of the post of Indra usually performs. When the old Indra saw this, he was very much surprised, and he wondered how this new Indra had attained the post without the necessary activities. The old Indra, greatly disturbed, went to the ocean of milk to pray to Lord Vishnu. Upon finally obtaining an audience with Lord Vishnu, the old Indra asked, "My dear Lord Vishnu, in the past I performed many sacrifices and pious activities for which I was installed as the Lord of Heaven. But now another person has taken my place, and apparently he never performed any great sacrifices. So how is it possible that he obtained the throne?" Lord Vishnu replied, "My dear Indra, that great soul has daily recited the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. During his life he recited 5 verses from this daily, and by doing so he obtained the results of all pious activities and sacrifices. After enjoying as the king of heaven for many years, he will enter my personal abode. If you also recite this chapter daily, you also can do this." After hearing Lord Vishnu's words, the former Indra took the form of a Brahmana, went to the town of Kalikagrama, the sacred residence of Kaleshvara, a form of the Supreme Lord. Near this town, on the bank of the Godavari river, sat a pure, merciful Brahmana who understood the topmost goal and secret of the Vedic literatures. Daily he sat there and recited verses of the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. The former Indra, happy to see him, at once fell at his feet and requested him to teach him this chapter. After reciting from the 18th chapter, the former Indra attained the topmost abode, Vishnu Loka, where he realized that the pleasure he had enjoyed as Indra had been insignificant. For this reason, the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita is especially chanted by great sages who quickly attain the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu.